Welcome to the Dublin Woodturners May Seminar. We were thrilled to host the internationally acclaimed woodturner Tomi Tomasic, who travelled all the way from Croatia. During this engaging full-day seminar, Tomi showcased three impressive projects. He began by crafting a platter from olive ash, followed by a lidded bowl, and concluded with a sphere featuring a hidden box.
Thank you. Is this on? Sorry. I think it's, yeah. First of all, thank you all for coming, and I see a lot of familiar faces and some of the new ones, so thank you for coming. And just to say a few words for all of you that are not familiar with my videos or my work, my name is Tomislav. Again, I usually say this at the every demo. You can call me Tom, Tomi. Nobody calls me Tomislav, so basically anything with Tom, Tomi, Tomek, I'm fine. So I'm a professional woodturner for roughly 7 years now. Living off wood turning, so either selling my work or my tools, doing demonstrations. But I've been turning for roughly 20 years, so I'm a joiner by trade, and we had, or at least I was lucky enough to have one of the last teachers of wood turning before it shut down as a trade in Croatia. I had the opportunity to work with him. So throughout the years, up to 7 years ago, I would turn maybe once a week, table legs or anything like that, furniture related. But again, roughly 7 years ago, I started this just as my own business. So again, if you have any questions or anything like that, please raise your hand during the demo. It doesn't matter if you interrupt me or not. I'm here because of you, for you, so any questions, just shoot. So I'll be doing 3 demonstrations today. The first one will be platter, and the second one will be, I have it here, I'll show you later, so cross-grain box. This one is, the last time I did Rafa inspired, this one is more of a Steve Jones inspired box. And finally, for the last demo, it's a little bit tricky one, the puzzle sphere boxes. And hopefully that should keep you awake, at least it will be keep me awake. So again, any questions or anything like that, just shoot, and I'll be happy to help out. So to start with the demo, so I have brought here a sample piece. So this is a maple, and I actually finished this with white oil. So if you're not familiar, usually with maple, it likes to yellow. If you use like linseed oil or something like that, it can get sort of yellowish patches. And if you put one coat of white oil on, it's sold specifically as white oil, then you'll get sort of this appearance, which is more consistent and it won't yellow as much. And on top of that goes your regular finish, whatever you are using. So this is the design that I'm roughly going to do today. So on the bottom, this is a platter, although slightly smaller size. Usually if it's a plate, for example dinner plate, you would make a base much larger. So at least minimum 70% of the diameter the base needs to be. So whenever you are cutting your meat on the side, for example, or something doesn't tip over. However, for the platters, you're mostly displaying, for example, I don't know, salami or something, cheese, you know. So there's not much going on in the platter, and it can have smaller base. Usually 50%, give or take. Again, usually I don't measure. You'll see that as a common theme today. Usually I just go by eye or just what looks right to me. Now, what I'm going to show you today also is how to make an OG profile, nice and simple. And this is a technique I learned from Jimmy Clues. It's really nice and simple. It involves just a few lines and measurements, and if you follow these rules, you'll end up with a nice OG profile, so reverse curve. And on the inside we'll have similar approach, OG, but it will be interrupted with the bead. So all of that for this platter here. Now this is a really nice chunk of ash, and originally it had a center hole on the bottom here. But as I look at this piece, this is olive ash, by the way, so it has these darker patches here, resembles like an olive, hence the name. But what I've done is actually transfer the center hole on top here, because there is a gray or brownish color here of that olive wood. So I would like to incorporate that in the rim. So it looks kind of a contrast, and I think it should look quite nice. Now, getting this on the lathe, you can use whatever method you're comfortable with. So either using a face plate, you can use woodworm screw for your chuck, faceplate ring. So whatever method you are using, just make sure you are comfortable with that and that you position your blank on the lathe nice and safely so it doesn't fly off to the shop. So what I'm using here, this is Wickmark 3-in-1 chuck, and of course I'll always forget to do this. I should loosen this before I go on a trip. So this can disassemble, so you can unscrew the outer ring here. Just take this out. So this is the backing plate for this chuck, and you can see it has quite a long screw, so you don't need all that screw. I could use it for this blank possibly. However, if it's a thinner blank, then obviously you'll end up with a hole in the center. That's why we space it out. But what I wanted to just tell is you can unscrew this outer ring and you can flip it around, so you have this diameter as a backing plate, for example, for smaller stuff, and then finally you have the smallest diameter here. So it's quite versatile. Usually I have it just in this position, and I have little baby screw chucks out of wood and just the screws for smaller stuff. And also, before I start, usually maybe you'll have to help me out find the right word during the demo. So again, English is not my native language, so I do apologize in front for that. So again, getting the blank on the lathe first. So what I've done is I've drilled 8mm hole in the center, and I like to feed this on with the lathe running, so nice and slowly. That's not very slow, so around 400 RPM. I hold it below the blank, so, and this is nice and round blank, so when it does spin off, there's nothing catching my hand, there's no corners or anything like that. And just nice and slowly, and it feeds itself in. Once it's on the lathe, you can just tighten it up a little bit, and you can feel if there is enough grip from the screw. So if it does spin off, let's say on the screw, there are other methods that we can use to chew it up, or at least to mount it back on the lathe. So first thing that I like to do is clean up the very bottom here. And of course we have to find the correct speed for this piece. Now it does have that olive part on the outside, which is good thing in terms of color and everything, but that usually is slightly denser than the rest of the blank. So what you can do is throw the blank out of balance, so it can wobble quite a bit. So that's running now at 1097 RPM. Maybe a bit more, you can see it starts to rattle, so that's 1200. So bring it back down to where it's nice and calm, at least for now. Ball gouge. This is what I call nimble ball gouge. It's maybe not the best value for money. I'm a terrible salesman, by the way. It has a shorter flute, shorter steel, and shorter handle than regular gouges. So usually gouges would have at least 14-inch handle long, and they usually have quite a bit of flute exposed. And that's a good thing if you want value for money. However, sometimes I do need more stability and more, that's why I call it nimble ball gouge. It just works beautifully the way I'm holding the tool, so I can work it around any kind of shapes, curves, without handle in the way, usually bumping. If you have small lathes, it bumps on the bedways and stuff like that. So again, ball gouge, it's a little bit too low to rest, so raise it up a little bit. Flute goes roughly pointing, so this will be 12 o'clock, this is around 10 o'clock. And I drop the handle ever so slightly down. And that's the blank almost screwed up on the bottom. So nice and clean. Actually there is something a bit more, so one more. So nice and gently, let the timber come down to the tool. You don't force it, because if you fight the timber, then you get this kind of sound, terrible sound. But if you don't fight it, you get this sound. Quite a difference. And if you're not fighting with the bevel and everything, you don't need your left hand so much. So just a little bit of as a stable. And I'm going slowly, slightly more, slightly more. And there is slight vibration. The chuck is relatively small for this piece, for this size at least. So I might have to bring, when I do most of the OG here, I might have to bring the tail stuff just to calm down this outer diameter here. So I want to trim this area from this side. Again, this is just roughing cuts. The reason I'm cleaning this area here, so now I have nice clean blank. So this is clean. I have clean diameter without any flat spots, and I have a nice clean top edge. So whenever measurements I'll be taking, I have a nice clean blank. There is no rough bits that will interfere with the design or anything like that. Talking about design, so I have to think about the foot here, or how I'm going to hold this piece. And what I've chosen is this chuck here, and I think these are around 100 mil jaws, and I'll be using a recess. So I'll just slightly expand just a little bit these jaws so they're not completely closed, maybe a bit more, like so, and take the measurement on the outside, and we'll see how that corresponds with this piece. So again, this is slightly designed on the fly, so just get that. So that's roughly there, lock that in. And what I have on my calipers is one side is nice and sharp, the other one is slightly rounded over. So you won't be able to see it on the camera, but it's slightly rounded over with a diamond file. Doesn't have to be much. I'm sure this has happened to everybody. So when you're marking with the left hand or left leg of the calipers or dividers, if you touch with the right portion, it can snatch out of your hand. So that's why just rounding them over slightly reduce all of that chance. So marking with the left side, and that lines up. And I think that should be good for this even. I'm just thinking about proportion here. Yeah, I think this should be okay. Now to create a recess, what I like to use is a square end scraper, which it's not square end, it's actually slightly curved. So the peak of the curve on this scraper is on the left point here, corner rather, and it slopes down with a slight curve, roughly maybe 1-2 degrees, so not much, but enough that I can engage it without engaging a lot of this edge. So 19 mil is a nice wide scraper, so if you engage all of it at once, it will snatch. And it's not a pleasure, especially with standard scrapers. You can get away with negative rake scrapers, but again, I don't use them. So the way I create creases is just back and forth, going deeper with each scrape. And that should be roughly there, like so. And also I'll just clean this up. It's nice and smooth. Maybe a bit more. There we go. And undercut the rim here for the chuck. I don't measure this. I don't care about the angles, that the angle on the recess has to be negative on the, from the chuck, so I don't bother with that. What I usually do is I grab a skew and I position it so the skew is flat up against this surface here, so this roughly around there, and just straight in, right into a corner. And make sure you have a nice clear corner. Now that seems just a bit too shallow, and I'll go slightly deeper, just a little bit. There we go. Now usually with Wickmark's chart, I'm confident to hold this size, let's say, for maybe 1.5 mil recess, but with the other chucks they usually have small chamfer on the outside, tiny bit, but that can prevent getting it right into a corner. And again, just a personal preference, but nothing wrong with using other chucks before. So just getting right into a corner, like so, and I'll use the left side of the skew just to brush this corner so it's not sharp. And now I need to do something with, or at least I like to do something with this hub in the center. So when you're making your insides, if you remove all this lump in the center, if you go slightly too deep, then you'll have a really thin sound, or also you can go through obviously and make a funnel, and we've all done that, so nothing to be ashamed of, but again, making something even as shallow as this here, so this is maybe 2 mil hump in total, serves a purpose, and again makes it sound slightly different when you're using either a dinner plate or a platter like this one. So the way I would do that, if I can, I would scrape it, and nothing wrong using scrapers. Just get that out of the way. There was a misconception that you're not a proper turner if you're using scrapers, and luckily that's not the case anymore, or at least for some people. But scrapers can be a really good tool, especially for a lot of the timbers. It's much easier. You don't have to do push cut to get a decent surface. You can get it straight from the scraper if you use it properly. And again, I use only standard scrapers. There are a couple of scrapers with negative angle, but those are for any kind of specific purpose. So let's see if I can bring the speed slightly higher. No, it doesn't want. I mean, other than the wall here, I probably could turn it slightly faster. But let's go back down to 1100 RPM, and let's, at least while the mass is gone, maybe it will run a little bit smoother. Now, this is my foot, and this is slightly more protruding out, so I have to get this slightly down. Like so. So that's now below this surface here. And again, just make something out of that as a feature. For example, just to show you square and scraper, like so, and then roll it. And I'll use the width of the tool as a gauge, so I don't have to measure it. So if I'm making multiple of these, I would use a tool as a gauge, let's say. So that's one bead, and let's create another one. Just going straight into the center like this. Like that, and just clean up this right into a corner. There we go. And just to show you the surface, it should be quite good. Yeah, that's pretty good. Slightly rougher here, so I can smooth that out just a little bit. Slightly grain is going slightly at an angle, so let's see. This is shear scraper, refiner, as I call it. So if I hold it up on the angle, I can get a shear approach, and I'll show you that later, how that works when we get to the OG profile. So I'll do the same for the center. So there is a misconception that you have to have a great speed in order to get a clean cut, which is not the case. Well, not always, at least. I'm just cleaning up the corners here so they're nice and presentable. So that's done. Now let's focus on the foot itself. Now, again, platter can be slightly smaller foot, so roughly, I think that looks okay and will give us a nice wide OG profile. Maybe a smidge more than that, like here. But there is a sorry. Dry throat. So the recess has roughly 3 mm. And this is the important bit. I want my foot to be roughly half of that size. And there is a reason for that. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Apologies for that. So I'll try to just illustrate what I have here. So I'm drawing the recess itself. So we have a lump here, that's this area, and we have this area right into corner. And hopefully, is that visible? Yeah. And this is the remaining bit of the foot here. I want my foot, a little ridge here, to be roughly half the thickness of the recess. And the reason for that is, so if I don't have a eraser, so this is my foot, like so. There we go. So the reason for that is, when the jaws expand, if you have a weak area here, it can blow out. Now this is relatively wide that I don't expect any issues, but if this was smaller, you want to make the recess slightly deeper than the foot here, and the jaws will actually expand into the timber which is above the foot, if that makes sense. So when we see that better, when we create an OG here, the jaws will actually expand into that part of the timber rather than just expanding on the foot here, which is roughly 20 mm wide. So again, if it's narrower, it can cause an issue where when you expand the jaws, it can break out. So now I need to rough out that foot. Again, I'll use a ball gouge. Now, this is a technique that I like to do. I'm just covering the tool with my hand, because if I don't, you can see just flies. Just the nature of how I turn, the shavings are flying to my face. So you get obviously shaving in your throat, and you sound like me a few seconds ago. So just a little hand over the tool prevents all of that. So I want to go roughly to this line. Like so, and expand it outside. So again, no drama, there's no fighting with the timber, and that's almost there, maybe a bit more. There we go. Now, creating the OG profile. This is my thickness. I will reduce the thickness slightly, so maybe up to here. Sometimes it's better to sacrifice a little bit of timber for design rather than just stick with the blank that you have and then ruin or compromising the shape or proportions just because you want to use the entire piece of timber. And again, this is what I'll probably end up as a thickness when I reverse this. And I'll just put a reference line roughly 6 mil below my final thickness. So roughly there. And the second line that I'm going to put is mark of third. So you divide this area here into thirds. So roughly that should be, let's see, around there. So I'll mark that. So I have a reference line here, so that's the one below the top line, and this here. So now what I want to do is just connect these two lines. Again, this is a trick from Jimmy Clues, works beautifully, and you can incorporate that into any kind of shapes, any kind of boxes, plates, whatever you're doing. The fastest way removing that bulk is again with the ball gouge. Going a little bit fast. So let's go flat. Okay, far from straight. A bit more. There we go. So I have a flat, and the next thing is, this is my flat area, flat portion angle. So divide that again roughly into half, and for this size I think 6 mil, slightly less than that, will be the deepest part of this cove. So just make a cove from this point to this point in a nice shallow curve. Now, I've tried this the other way that Jimmy showed, and it is much easier to go against the grain like this rather than with the grain like so. Just because you tend to exit in the wrong place, so you change the design entirely. So go against the grain, it will smooth up the surface later. So nice cove, maybe a bit more, just a little bit. Like so. And now finally we mark the half point from corner here to this line here, which is around there. Again, you could measure this, but just do it by eye. You'll be much faster and more efficient, let's say. So that's half and half, and all I have to do now is just make a nice shallow curve here with this lump. And again, back to the ball gouge. And you'll see OG profile, so really nice and simple profile. Looks great, I think it's a classic and fits the platters quite nicely. Now the surface, as I mentioned, isn't great because I went against the grain. You can see a turnout grain here and here and a little bit here as well. Also I had to clean up this a little bit, haven't seen that. But now we can clean up our blank, and not sure if you want me to sand the piece or not. Just airborne dust. Oh, okay, that's cool. So we'll make this tool finish platter. Shear scrape, what that is. So flat scrape would be this, keeping your scraper flat, and you get this kind of a shaving. So it's like you're rolling carpet or tarp or anything like that. But if we present the tool in a slightly different angle by tilting it up on the edge, same grain on the side of this piece, the shaving, you can see hopefully that's a completely different kind of shaving. This is coil and this is rolled up carpet, something like that. So completely different approach with the same tool. So For now, I always try going with a scraper flat because it's much easier. Hopefully you can hear there is not much noise to it. So really light touch. You're not forcing, you're not pushing real hard. So nice and gently. You see I'm getting all these wispy fibers, and I need to go a little bit more. So nice and gently. If that didn't fix the grain, we'll then shear scrape. And I do feel a little rougher patch here, just a tiny bit, and also here in this area. So we'll shear scrape it. Before that, actually, I'll use a spindle gouge just to clean up the very foot of the piece. So I close the flute at around 9:30, let's say. So this will be again 12, this will be 9, just slightly opened. And I'll drop the handle down, and as I raise the handle, it will go straight in, like so. So just a tiny movement here. And that's really nice and clean, that doesn't need any sanding at all. And now let's finish up the profile. Now, this is a little bit tricky part, I don't recommend. So I'll show it, but don't do it. So you can position the scraper right into a corner like this. But if you position it like this and try to get it into the corner, you'll have a catch. It will skate over your foot here. So I close it all the way, and I have to be again aware of the curve, that the curve doesn't catch in the corner here. And again, it will be a skate over your foot. So in the corner, and as I move away from the corner, I'll flatten the scraper a little bit around 45 degrees, and you're getting these lots of tiny coils. And that feels quite good. And I move nice and short increments, so don't go all the way. So go little by little. And what I like to do is, I don't drag it like so. I have much more control if I just do this with my hand. So just squeeze your fingers. And again, little by little. That the curvature is the same, hasn't changed. But let's see what has done to the grain. So I'm quite happy with that. I can leave it as it is. Yeah, a little bit of a 180 grit sanding and it will be finished. So, as I mentioned, there is a little torn grain here. So, again, if it doesn't like to be, ash is quite good for scraping, by the way. But sometimes if the grain is slightly off in any kind of way, just shear scrape it. And if that doesn't work, then you can, usually I will try pulling the burr, because it's much sharper burr then. And if that doesn't work, then obviously you would switch to 120 grit scraper now. So that's looking really good. I'm happy with that. And there is one thing that I like to also do, and that is just soften the corner here so it's not sharp. So that's done. The bottom is finished. That looks okay, I'm happy with that. So again, a little bit of sanding will take care of any other blemishes, and this is how it looks now. Make sure when you flip it around and put it in the chuck that you don't have any debris in the corner. So that's pretty good, I'm happy with that. Again, the grain is slightly off in this area here, but a little reverse sanding will just take care of that in no time. So get this chuck off the blade.
Thomas, are those 3-in-1 chucks still available from Bookmar, yeah?
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be on their website at least. I haven't seen it in any Europe stores. Maybe DNS in Germany maybe have them, but I haven't seen it from anybody else that sells Bookmar equipment. So this is Axminster Evolution SK114. So that goes goes on. At the very last end, just lock it a little bit. In case if you're doing any kind of a reverse sanding, you don't want to chase your ball around, you know, when it comes off. And I have that happen, so I need to check. So again, make sure you have a nice clear recess, and this is the one thing that I like to do as well. So what I like to do is align the jaws, so you can see the slot is vertical, and I like the grain also vertical. So what that does is each part of the jaws that will expand, it will expand into the same type of grain. So what I mean by that, if I tilt this at an angle like so, this jaw, for example, will expand into side grain. This one will expand and this one into end grain. And these two, of course, end grain is much harder, so it won't expand as much. For example, on the side grain, it can slightly more expand. And you'll have maybe slight deviation, let's say, in how true your blank runs. Again, it's not a huge issue. It's not like I do that for every piece. As you see for the cross-grain box, I don't care how much for the smaller pieces, but for this bigger one, I do prefer to do that way. So just expand, and that runs pretty good, not perfect. Retighten it, but there you go. It should be okay. Slightly off, but again, any kind of shaping that we'll do here will round over the edge, so I don't care much about that. Turning doesn't have to be complicated, let's call it that way. So it's a natural thing, it's timber, so it will move, it will warp ever so slightly or anything like that. So it's a natural thing. So again, I could go again here with the gouge or with the, let's say, spear point scraper and chew this up again or sand it again. But what's the point when I'm going to do this? No one will ever know that this was on the lathe at one point slightly off. So I need to clean the top here. Now I can use a scraper. Let's see how it likes to work here. Not great. But it's a fun way of removing stuff, but there is a lot of oscillation here and the scraper doesn't like that, so back with the ball now. Just to smooth that out. There we go. So now I can remove these roughly 5 mil, 6 mil of thickness, and let's see how it now behaves. The reason I like to use scraper for this instead of a gouge, it's much easier to sharpen a scraper than a gouge, for example. And I'm going straight into side grain, so it's much less effort than going, for example, into end grain like this. So if I try to remove all this, going straight that way, first of all, you'll dull your tools much faster, and you're just fighting uphill battle, which is not necessary. So going straight into a spindle, much more easier way. Now, important bit when using standard scraper is you should be able to see this quite well. So this is level. You want to have the end of the handle slightly higher than the cutting edge. So as you can see, even though I'm away from the tool, nothing has happened. There is no catch or anything, as you can see. But if I drop the handle down like this, it will be a catch. And some of you will have to catch the platter, so you don't want that. If you're using negative rig scrapers, then you have a little leeway room for that. So the top bevel on your negative rig scraper, this is Q by the way, will act as a top of the standard scraper. So as long as that top bevel is not pointing into the timber, you're fine. So just to prove that, I can drop the handle down and you can see nothing happens. But if I drop it way down, it will be again a catch. So negative rig scrapers are not entirely without any issues, or you can't get a catch or anything like that. You can just, you have to know how to get a catch even. Hopefully you can see I'm using almost half of the width of the tool, so this is 25 mil, so roughly half inch, 12 mil, without any issues. If the timber doesn't like it, it will tell me. And I have the handle up against or underneath my forearm, so I have a weight of the arm on top of the tool. And I'll raise the tool very slightly so I'm at the center height when I raise the scraper end. The center is not spinning as fast, so you have to go slower. And now just brush across to clean it up. So again, it's a rough profile for the moment. And back with the ball gouge. Now for the platter, you can play around in terms of how wide you want your rim to be. Usually, I don't know, maybe 1/5, even 1/4 of the diameter, depending on the design. Now there is a nice piece over there. It has a nice wide rim and looks really, really good. So you can again play around. I wouldn't go any less than 1/5, let's say. So. Oh, awesome. Thank you. So again, just rough line, for example here. So that will be, if I measure, you can see I have 4 spaces, 4 parts. So first I'll just try with that, and if I don't like it, I can always slightly change it. First I'm going with slight curve here for the moment, and then I'll focus the rim here towards inside. So I'll stay away from the thickness. For example, I'll make it OG profile going towards the bottom, but slightly thicker. And then I'll introduce a bead, and then I'll bring every other surface except the bead lower, and that will expose a bead like this platter here. So this is a rough OG profile matching the outside, and it's slightly thicker in the beginning, and then I make a bead and then bring everything else below to thickness that I want. And again, you can play around with different kind of designs. Sorry? Oh, that was a question. And I stop before I hit the big end grain wall. So this is quite, you can see it's bigger than my right wing on the gouge. So I stop before that. And you can feel what's happening. Maybe a bit more. Here, and bring this down. So, and continue on. So again, I'm just copying what I have on the outside, on the inside, but slightly thicker. And for the moment, I'll stop here, and I'll finish the top portion here with scraper. Now, when you have a thinner portion like this, it's always a good idea to support the back of the plate, so here, with any kind of pressure that you are using. Even though it's a tiny pressure, you want to equalize that because it can vibrate and it will make a chatter noise and so on. So, like this, and I support the back of the plate. And that feels quite good. A little lump here. Now, I will hold this paper. It doesn't feel as sharp as it should be. So, now I could go to a grinder, or I can pull the burr with the burnisher, but sometimes in a hurry, for example, it's much easier to just grab a burnisher, diamond file, and then just position it here, so you can see it. So the way I would hold the scraper is first flat on the tool on top, and just remove any remnants of the old burr. I always do that. In my mind, just works much better. So even though we are using the burr from the scraper, not so much the edge, it's still important that the edge is nice and sharp. So my bevel angles on the scrapers are roughly from 45 to 55 degrees, and that's not so much common when you see it today. It's usually around 70, 80 degrees. It's quite blunt. And for me, it doesn't work as efficient as a scraper because you don't have a nice sharp edge, especially if you're rolling the edge with the burnisher. Because if you roll it with the burnisher, then you have a nice hook that you rolled, so your sharp edge, into a hook like this. And if you don't have a nice sharp edge, it won't do the job as good as if it's nice and sharp. So once I've removed the remnants on the top of the scraper, I find the bevel, so roughly there, and I raise it maybe 1 or 2 degrees, and just phone around, doesn't take much. Like so, and by the way, this is, I think, 1000 grit. You can use anything, 300, whatever we have on hand. It will work pretty much the same. So it will, or it should be at least, a little bit more obvious that it's nice and sharp, and I think it is, just by the look of the shavings. And again, I'm just nice and light touch. That feels quite good. And I want to finish this outside profile, which will slightly roll over. So I tilt it up on the side. Nice. And maybe you can leave 2 mil, let's say, a flat. Now, somebody loves a flat rim here, so nothing wrong with that. Usually I would sand it so it's a little bit nicer to carry it around. Usually I would do that with sandpaper. There we go. So that's relatively sharp enough, but I can't cut myself, so that's maybe 1.5 mil flat area, which when I start to sand, let's say this piece, then just knock off the corners and you're done. So it's much faster that way than using tools, so at least for me. So this looks actually quite good. Let's see if I can bring this, maybe. Okay, I'll mess it up for the second demo. Just to see if there is any kind of picked up grain, but it doesn't look to be, at least what I can see. So now I can proceed forward towards the inside. Now I left on purpose this hump. Usually for smaller stuff, smaller plates, I wouldn't bother so much with this lump in the center, but this is wider platter, so you need stability here, and you work your way in towards the center. So again, back with the scraper, bring this down. Now you maybe notice that I haven't drilled a depth hole. For this, I don't drill it. Not that you can't do it, it's more of a, because I'm copying the OG on the outside, on the inside, I'm more feeling it, what's happening here on the foot here. So I feel what's happening, and I feel when I get this down, it should be just right thickness, hopefully. So you can get this down. Now just to show you alternative way, you can use a gouge here. Like so. And that little twitch that you saw maybe happened because I reached that bigger end grain wall. And that now is, my calipers will say that this is roughly 13-14 mil tip here. So I can reduce that, but again I have to make a bead. And now it's the time to do that. Still having the center in. And let's first go, I think this line here, just above this line that I have, I'm not sure if you're going to see it on the camera, is a good spot for a bead. So very nice and gently out. So that's good. Back with the square and scraper to expose the lower side. And this needs a bit of a sharpening as well. Now actually, just to show you how I will sharpen this on the grinder. Again, I don't bother too much with the grit itself. So I can sharpen it on a white wheel, 80 grit, or gray wheel, which is 60 that I have at home, or 180, 120, 240, whatever we have in terms of CBM. Now, interestingly, this is slow running grinder. I actually prefer faster running grinders. In my opinion, with the proper CBM wheels, it will give you a really nice sharp edge. Not that this one won't do it, it will, but I think the faster running are just a tiny bit sharper. But it's super hard to find these days. So I'm actually on the lookout for a fast running grinder that can cope, similar to this one, for example, but that can cope with CBM wheels like this. So at least 1 horsepower, for example. Now, the way I will sharpen this, you can grab a flat fork if you want. And tighten that up. Again, the angle roughly is, this is shooting below, you won't be able to see, but I'm taking off the heel here, so it will take a long time to get up to the edge. So I want to adjust the platform a little bit, like so. Let's see where that lands. So I'm taking off now. You can see slightly more on the heel, so a tiny bit more of adjustment, but I'm actually quite close to the wheel. So I'm going to pull the platform slightly out and just turn it down just a tiny bit more. And I'm okay with that. Now, I actually forgot to bring, so I'll use one of these. I always have on the grinder wet and dry sandpaper, the black one, gray one, and it's I think 600, 800 grit. And I always flip down the scraper before I sharpen the fresh burr one. So flat surface, roughly flat, and just flip it upside down and give it a few rubs, like so. That will remove again any remnants of the old burr and polish up the top of the scraper a little bit. And now just follow along the profile that we have on the scraper. A little bit more on the nose. This is now actually reached the top of the scraper, and I can feel a work here. So when I go with my fingers over the edge, you should be able to feel something grab your fingers. So that way you know you have a nice sharp scraper. And that works great. So just check where I am. Okay, this is just about exposing the bead or exposing the material that I can turn into a bead. So you can see I have a little ridge that I can turn into a bead, and the thickness, again, now it's getting thinner, and I'm okay with that. I'll actually remove some of the hump here in the center. Let's see if I can now bring a bit more speed. Okay, I can, 1400 RPM. Get the tool rest slightly closer. Now light pressure. Now I'm already thinking about where I'm going to project the curve going into the center. So you already now trying to transition the curve from here through here down to the center. So think of it a few steps earlier, or in front rather. And I know there is a lot of questions asking why I have a notch on the refiner scraper here. And the notch is actually, this one is an early prototype, so it doesn't have a big round over on the bottom, as you can see. The one that you can buy from me have a nice big round over here, so it glides really nicely on the tool rest if you're shear scraping. But that also affects this corner here. And by notching the corner here, I get a nice sharp corner here, if that makes sense. It's really nice and sharp, and I can use that to, for example, make a detail. So if I go, for example, here, I can make a quick detail. Hopefully you can see that. So nice quick detail, and for example, for the bottom of the plates or anything like that. You see maybe I've disconnected something. No, no problem, no problem. Can you hear me like this, or? Okay, awesome. Before we get the battery here, so again, the notch is just for that, making quick work of details, and I can also use it to shear scrape into detail, right into a corner, and you'll see that when I get to the final stage of making this bead here. And yeah, we're nice and loud now. So again, just feeling what's happening with my fingers, and now since I have a little bit more speed, it's a little bit less resistance to strain, and you get much finer shavings. Again, there are turners out there that believe that you have to use the 3000 speed, you know, that you have on your lathe. I've never turned anything faster than maybe 2100. So even the tiny stuff that I turn for example, on in Austria for the event, I would turn a small goblet with lots of rings, loose rings. That's maybe 2-3 mil big, and I would use the 2000 speed. I never go above that. In my mind, there is no need to go higher than that. Maybe applying some finish or something like that, but for turning, there is really no necessity for that. So I'm getting quite close to my final thickness, and now if I position the scraper on the shear scraper mode, tilting up on the side, and I'll use that notch to shear scrape right into a corner here. Otherwise, I would not be able to do that. For example, this now is slightly wider band for a bead, but let's see if I can roll that. Probably it will end up slightly smaller. Now, to roll a bead, I like to use a spindle gouge. Nice and gently, and right into a corner. And do the other side. For the other side, you have to swing the handle around with you, otherwise you just end up with a taper or a chamfer. And stop in the bottom. So I'm quite happy with that. All I have to do now is just remove the egg. Stay here. So just to remove the excess here in the corner. And blend everything. There we go. And I'll just clean up the very top here. There is a little indentation. And I think that's bead done. Sorry. This is dry stuff.
You need some Guinness, Thomas.
Sorry?
You need some Guinness.
Yeah. So the bead is nice and clean. I like it how it looks. And at least for now, the thickness is okay. So what I'm going to do is just remove this hump, and I can better assess the curve and if I have enough thickness, and we'll tap the sound to see how thick it is actually and so on. So just quickly remove this. Again, scraper. That sound that you probably heard while I scraped this final bit, the wood is reacting and it's telling me, you know, you're taking slightly too much, so reduce a little bit of the volume that you're taking off. The center is not again spinning as fast. I'll stop here, we'll refine the curve in the next step. $11 mil here in the thinnest part, I would say. So yeah, I can thin it down a bit more. So make a, as Richard likes to say, make a commitment in terms of thickness. So that's my commitment. So I've done maybe 1.5 mil deeper and just expand that outside and blend everything nicely to this point here. So again, I'm just copying what I have on the outside in a rough form. And the sound will tell me if I'm getting closer to final thickness. And again, light touch. Now just to show you, we have the time, right? Yeah, so that's pretty good curve, I'm happy with that. That's pretty good. Just to show you pulling the burnisher, how that works. So what I'm going to do, since I've used the burnisher on the edge here, the very edge on the top is slightly mushed over from the not burnisher, but file. So what I'm going to do is just establish a fresh bevel, and just before that, actually, I'll just remove the old burr. Now the burr is still good, still is fine. I just want to show you pulling the burr. So the top of the scraper is nice and clean, and going back to the grinder. Just give me a few seconds. And again, if I feel the burr on top, that means that I've reached the top of the edge. So I get a lot of emails asking how you get your scraper sharp to do whatever I'm doing. The key is that you are actually certain, because in most of the cases, turners hasn't reached the top edge. So they think they've reached the top edge, but they're not. So just have to be sure that you have the burr after a grinder, and this is now perfectly usable burr, and I would use it. But again, just to show you what happens with burnisher. So counterintuitive, I will now remove that burr again. So just remove that, so it's nice and sharp edge. So this is now nice and sharp tool, and grab a burnisher which I haven't brought. Nevertheless, we're going to manage, grab something that's harder than your, in this case this is M2 cryogenic steel. I know that this gouge here is M42, so this is a little bit harder. And what I like to do is keeping it flat on the top of the scraper, give it a few rubs, just a few. And what that will do is extend in microscopic level the edge of the steel past the bevel, just a little tiny bit. And then I find the bevel itself, raise it 1 or 2 degrees, and I make 1, 2, and really moderate pressure, and I can feel a burr here. Now again, not ideal, that's why I'm making burnisher separately. It's a little bit more manageable, and the rods are slightly more polished as well, so it glides much easier. But let's see if this will do the job. And the key thing with burnisher is you don't overdo it. Because if you roll too heavy of a burr, it will be extremely grabby tool. It will just jerk like this from your hand, so not a good and pleasant way of using the tool. Now, that feels like a good curve, slight lump here. And I have a little ridge here, so shear straight that. And I'm happy with that. Everything else can be sanded away, so that's pretty much finished. Now, there is one thing that I can do to crisp up the detail here on the bead. It feels like it's not definitive enough. So what I can do is grab a skew, and I'll just go right into a corner. And I'm actually slightly using as well the side of the skew, just to sort of shear straight the side of the bead, just to give it a bit more definitive. And going back with the square and scraper, going right into a corner, like so. Now, a bit more happy with that. Yeah, that's pretty good. So, that's our plate see and feel the thickness. I think that's pretty good. Nice and flat, feels good in the hands. And again, there is slightly rougher grain here and here. Actually, I haven't seen that, so I can put it back on the lathe. And what I'll do is just shear scrape a tiny bit. Doesn't matter that it's not running as true as it should. Slightly out of round, more than I was expecting. Maybe there is something in the corner. Or maybe just warped as I remove it from the chuck, so it doesn't matter. But now it's much cleaner than it was before, and any kind of sanding will take care of any kind of rougher bits or anything like that. So just to prove on that, I won't sand too much, so you don't have to breathe all this. But this is 240 grit, by the way. So I'll stop here. And this will tell us how the surface is. And again, I'm quite happy with that. So just a few more seconds with sandpaper, it will be finished. So I can pass this around, and if you have any questions, please ask away.
What finish would you put on a Tom Tom? Would you still use the beeswax?
Depending on the use of it. So if it's going to a client, then I would apply an oil. I like using a wood turnings oil from Steinert, it's called. Again, depending on the timber, if it's maple, then I would apply their white oil first, so it doesn't yellow as much, and then the regular oil goes on top the next day. If it's like just a showpiece, then I would maybe put a beeswax on. Nothing wrong with using a beeswax, however, you have to be aware that it's not very protective. So if you're using it, well, that's at least my policy behind it. So if it's going to a customer, for example, I want the piece to be as pristine as it can be. So if I'm doing it for myself, usually I wouldn't finish it at all, or I would just apply a finish like a beeswax or something nice and quickly, so I can maybe finish it for a video or for a demo or something like that. But usually oil is my go-to finish, especially again for utilitarian stuff. For boxes and stuff like that, I sometimes use the Danish oil combination, or just any kind of wax or anything, because those kind of stuff can polish up nicely, and that's again my approach. Any other questions?
Which white oil do you use? Is it mineral oil?
The one that I use?
Yes.
No, it's I think it's a mixture of linseed oil, tung oil, and a lot of waxes in it. It's quite yellowish and thick solution. Now, the Steinert, not sure if you're familiar with the company, I think it's going, or it did go bankrupt. The new owner has bought it, and at least to my knowledge, they're not doing that well. So not sure if that oil will be available anymore, but at least for myself, I found out that Livos in Germany is making that. So for anybody who is interested, so Livos is the company, and they produce that kind of oil. And again, for me, works beautifully, and I will do a video comparing all the different oils that I have, and I have quite a bit of on my hands, so comparing how they finish up against the coffee or soup or hot liquids, cold stuff and stuff like that. So it should be interesting video as well. Any other questions?
Do you not use the calipers to get the thickness? No.
The entire plate thickness?
Calipers, you know, to get, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean you can use it. Yeah, no problem
You're
at
not
all.
using one, no?
No, I have these calipers for this kind of stuff, yeah. But if it's something intricate, like details that I can't reach or I'm not sure, then of course I will grab calipers and just measure just to be sure. For example, on this box here, it can be a little bit tricky to gauge the thickness in this area here. Not here, but rather just below in the middle here. So it can be deceiving. This is relatively thin. But getting it down to that thickness can be challenging. Of course, you can overshoot it, and this is where I would measure it with the calipers. And just by the way, all the turnings that you see here, the puzzle sphere boxes are for sale. If some of you are interested in those. So this box and the plate as well. I haven't brought any tools. I know that's often asked if I brought my tools for sale, but I didn't have any extra anymore. New ones that I could bring here. So, any other questions? Hopefully, I did the demo then okay. If there is no questions, so I'll take that as a yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.